Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences, such as...
When I was in college, my friend Nicole and I would joke that I had Tourette's, but we didn't think I actually did.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. Season 4. Hey everybody, it's Ben. Back from a nice break. Thanks so much for all the kind messages, especially from the new listeners who come to us at really the best starting point. Well, all right, the most practical starting point is Season 1, Episode 0. That's my backstory and kind of why this podcast came to be, or how. This podcast has momentum like no time before. And right now, this is news, adequate backing to support the growth, thanks to our new primary sponsor, the Tourette Association of America. This is 110% a great thing. To have their sponsorship, it doesn't change the style of the podcast at all. It just means staying power and a bigger audience and better resources to keep the show valuable. I explained in episode 0 of this season, season 4, released simultaneously with this episode. So you can find that at tourettespodcast.com or in your podcast player. But please listen to that one. It's not long. We cover a lot. Get to some listener questions, catch up on recent events like the Treating Tourette Together Summit that I got to moderate a couple panels at in Minnesota this past August. Shout out to Drs. Canalia and Capriati. More info coming on that, but you do get some details in episode 0. This is our regular episode with our Touretteer conversation. So this is where I, someone who has Tourette syndrome, spend some time talking with somebody else from somewhere else out there in the world who also has TS. And we have an unscripted, unstilted conversation that has no need for sensationalism. These are really relatable conversations, whether you have TS or not. They're definitely useful in understanding what Tourette syndrome truly looks like. Not just the snapshot or the meme or the other exploitive material that serves up a very narrow, very unfair portrayal of what Tourette is, which is funny because the fair portrayal, like we do here, is far more interesting anyway. Plus, it's helped me a lot in de-isolating myself, having these conversations, really connecting with people who get me in really rare ways. Anyway, that's the kind of thing we do here, and all questions are welcome. I love hearing from people who don't have TS, and obviously from people in the community too. This is a dialogue, new episode every week, and we talk in the interim. I live a better life that way, and if you do too, that's awesome. I want to hear about it. You'll find a lot to love in our conversation this week with Ed Cooney, who I've been in touch with since the beginning of the podcast. He's a really witty writer, and he had a blog exploring his TS. It was really great. He's also contributed to tourettespodcast.com, which features guest blog posts if you're interested in writing something. Ed hadn't had another talk with another Touretteer voice-to-voice like this before this conversation here. It's a first, and we just open it up. We just start blasting away at different conversational aspects of Tourette syndrome and funny stories, the way TS can make things real awkward real quick at the workplace. Ed's got stories. Real quick, this might help. At one point, we start referencing the Tourette iceberg, and we didn't really set it up. We just kind of started talking about it like everybody already knows what the iceberg is, and I assume some people listening don't. The iceberg is a graphic that the Tourette Association distributes that says something like tics are just the tip of the iceberg. So the graphic shows an iceberg, and the part of the iceberg that sticks up above the surface of the water is labeled tics, like motor tics and vocal tics. And then below the surface of the water, on the iceberg, are various other labels of the many things that often accompany TS, like OCD, depression, sleep disorders, anxiety, on and on. Basically, it just means that if you think Tourette syndrome is just about ticking, there's a lot more for you to know. So we dig into that. We talk about the comorbidities that Ed deals with. So we dig into that and so much more. This is a really fun talk with a lot of laughing. It's a great way to start the season. Here's me and Ed Cooney. I can hear some audio, but it's really jumbled sounding. Let me try to call you right back. Okay, let's try that again. The same thing. I'm hearing what sounds like some interference. I think there's a voice behind it, but it sounds really chopped up. Okay, let's try this again.
All right, how about this?
This sounds good.
All right. No, you caught me in my alien tick. That's what it was.
Yeah. I was nervous about asking. So I guess just to get us started, could you state your name and the general part of the world you live in, and what you do or how you would generally introduce yourself?
All right. My name's Ed Cooney. I live right outside Philly, and I am 39 years old. I have a wife and a 2-year-old son, and I work for a company that sells industrial supplies, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds.
So are you native?
No, I actually, weirdly enough, I was born in the Bronx, in like the exact same little area of the Bronx called Riverdale, where your season 1 guest Jason Grant was from.
Oh, no way. Okay.
It's like a tiny little nugget of the Bronx, and I remember him saying something like, "It's the Bronx, but it's not really like the Bronx that you think of." And he was so dead on with that.
That's funny.
But yeah, so we moved from the Bronx to the Jersey suburbs when I was like 7, and met my wife at a wedding about 8 years ago now, and she grew up around here, so this is where we ended up.
Gotcha. So your wife. This is always the daring question about relationships. How did you guys? What was TS kind of a prominent character early on with your relationship?
We were talking about this, I guess, like a month or 2 ago, and we couldn't really pin down the first time we talked about my tics.
Yeah,
but we think it was pretty early on, and it's never been a problem. I think she was more just concerned that I was comfortable and stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't, for all like a non-Tourette person knows, it's painful. They have no idea, and some of my tics are, some of them aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she came from a very unassuming place where she wanted to know if my eyebrows were ticking, if that was hurting my face muscles, and that kind of stuff. So once I told her that it was just a feature that I'd always had, that it never really came up too much.
I mean, that's a really considerate kind of curiosity, though. I mean, that's pretty cool that, open, willing, like they weren't bothered by it. They just want to make sure that you were cool with it. And I mean, that's a nice approach.
Yeah. She's basically just the kindest person who's ever lived. Nice. So you're trying to get you to take it for granted, but she's always been just very chill with it, and pretty protective of me about it. And she, I was only diagnosed less than 2 years ago now, and we're still trying to find like our comfortable zone of like how much should she ask me about if she notices me having like a bad tic day.
Yeah.
Should she let it ride, or should she ask me about it? And most of the time she asks me about it, and I'm comfortable enough at this point with her, with it at least, to say, while we're sitting down for dinner, like I had a really bad tic day today. It was, this thing or that thing, or just I woke up and that was it.
Yeah.
So it's everything comes from the acceptance. And after that, I think in dating and in marriage, you just find your groove and how much you want to talk about it, how much you don't want to talk about it. Because I could talk about this stuff for hours.
Yeah.
I could tell her, I started out with this tic, but then I noticed something else, and I almost gave my manager the middle finger, but I didn't, and I had to do this whole other ritual to like, to compensate for not doing that one tiny thing with my finger, but I didn't do it, so it was kind of cool.
Oh God.
It's there's so many I guess nuances.
Yeah.
To just a day with Tourette.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and first thing I want to say is that it's a pretty good question to explore on whether the person in the relationship who doesn't have TS, how often they should bring it up, or, kind of, state their concerns and make sure you're okay. I mean, I think I'm like you. I don't mind it when my wife brings it up. I mean, typically she just lets it ride, but some people are kind of set off more by the attention put on them when maybe the TS is kind of an autopilot thing otherwise. And I guess that is going to vary person to person. But I mean, I'm like you. I'm totally fine. Even if it does flare up a little bit after that, I'm not necessarily in a bad position with it. I'll have some painful tics here and there, but I mean, I enjoy talking about it, and the same way you do. But being diagnosed 2 years ago, when did tics set on for you?
I was like 8. That's talking to my folks. That's I think been the kind of consensus age we've kind of been able to come up with. And I mean, my parents asked my pediatrician, who was just a general pediatrician, who said that they were nervous tics and they'd go away, which they very clearly didn't. But it wasn't. I didn't have any of the the stereotypical, the ones that people make fun of. The coprolalia, big gestures or anything like that. So it kind of faded into the background of just being a kid.
Right.
I didn't really have it checked out again until I was in my mid-20s, and I went to a neurologist who didn't seem too interested in having me as a patient at all, who said it was just the way I was wired, and they could give me tranquilizers or something like that, but they would dull me over the course of a day or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I didn't deal with it again until, 2 years ago.
What made you want to seek out advice or medication? Or, I mean, were you experiencing painful tics, or was it just kind of flaring up more, or why pursue it?
I'd done my research online and stuff, and I went through the kind of like the stages of self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I probably have this. But at the time that I really started thinking about going to get it checked out, my wife was pregnant with her son.
Okay.
And I read that there was apparently a pretty big genetic component to it. And I want to be prepared for what happens if this gets passed on to my son, if I actually have it to begin with.
Yeah.
I needed to kind of verify that to, be able to learn how to deal with it in my own kid if this is the path that he ends up going down. So even then, I was still terrified of going back to a neurologist, because I thought, I think we talk about the way Tourette is portrayed in the media as being detrimental because it stigmatizes the condition so much, which is totally accurate. I think a secondary problem is that the portrayal of it in the media makes you as a viewer believe that if you don't have those stereotypical symptoms, then you don't have Tourette's.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what made me. So it kind of kept me from seeking out diagnosis. It's like, I don't, I'm not yelling curses in public.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything particularly wild. I probably don't have this, but when I actually started to educate myself about it, like, oh, wait a second, I do have all of these things. And so I went to a neurologist, and she specializes in movement disorders. And she was like, within 5 minutes, she's like, yeah, you have this. You definitely have this. This is pretty obvious that you have this.
Yeah.
She put me on medication that I didn't particularly enjoy. And I remember I was in the middle of Philly at University of Pennsylvania Neurology. And I was walking back to the parking deck where I'd parked, and I started getting really upset. And I realized that getting some official diagnosis from a person who knew what she was talking about, I think I'd kept alive this fantasy that one day I would wake up and be normal and just be okay. And no, you have Tourette syndrome. This is, if it's not gone by now, it's not going anywhere. You've got to learn to, deal with this going forward.
Wow.
And it was a pretty heady moment. I remember, I guess I've been symptomatic for 30 years. And when I was in college, my friend Nicole and I would joke that I had Tourette's. but we didn't think I actually did.
Hmm.
So I texted her as soon as I got back. And they're like, yo, Nick, I actually have Tourette. She's like, no way. I was like, we were right. We're practically neurologists now.
Man, you had that heady moment. Where does your mind go after that in terms of, so just kind of playing out in your head, this is something I need to get to know. I need to, kind of understand where it might head for me. I mean, what kind of, I guess, path did you go down with that? Was it more of just kind of worrying about it, or was it more kind of moving towards some kind of warmth and acceptance? Or
it was, I was on medication I was on clonidine for 6 months after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of figured that, that was akin to dealing with it.
Yeah.
Which, physically, it definitely reduced my tics, but it wasn't for me. And I ended up going off it 6 months later. And when I realized that I didn't want to be on medication for it, because that particular medication has dulled the heck out of me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, my neurologist at my second appointment upped my dose. And it's a pretty powerful drug, especially if you haven't been in any kind of medication most of your life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I went to work one day and I was having like borderline hallucinations.
Wow.
That, again, this is just my reaction. It's not saying that the medication is bad or anything. And I got like terrified, and I went home. And I have a golden retriever. She's, she doesn't like me the most. She likes my wife a whole lot, and she likes my son. I came home and I passed out for like 5 hours on the couch, and she did not leave my side for 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
And so I weaned myself off the medication after that, and that was kind of a wake up call. Like, oh, listen, you're not going to be on medication. This is going to be a thing permanently, and you should start trying to, make some attempt at just accepting it as a part of the person you are, and do the best just to integrate this into like my personality, as opposed to being something that I try to hide. And I feel a little bit of shame about my tics, which, it's not Tourette positive to say it, but I feel it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's hard sometimes, and you have to just kind of accept that some days it's going to suck. But I guess after I went off the medication, I did two things. I talked to our HR rep at work saying, listen, I just want you to know I have Tourette syndrome and I have some potentially problematic tics. I can go over the whole list, but the two that would be bad at work, I make like a kissy face with my lips.
Okay.
And I, which, can be very,
could be perceived,
misinterpreted very easily.
Yeah.
For perfectly good reason.
Yeah.
And I also have a little bit of chiropraxia in my right hand. I am constantly shooting out my right middle finger. I talked to one of the women at my son's daycare, because it turns out her son has Tourette too. And he has similar tics to mine with his right middle finger. And I said to her, like, I'm not like squaring up to people and like giving them the finger really madly or angrily.
Yeah.
It's mostly down on my side.
Yeah.
And it is worse around people I don't like, which kind of stinks.
Is it just because it's on your mind, or?
I don't know. I think it's the first part of me that realizes the person is there.
Yeah.
That's, again, a really embarrassing thing. And I swear to you, maybe a month ago at work, somebody saw it. I think the look on this person's face was just like absolute utter confusion. Like, why would this person just randomly pop out a middle finger at work?
Was there any follow-up?
I just kept on going.
Man. I've heard of that kind of thing before, and I've heard of I've seen people in the message groups or the discussion groups saying that. I think I've seen a couple of people say they've taped their hands or they've taped their fingers together, which is not all practical if you work in an office environment and you have to type, or if you have anything where you need to use your fingers as part of your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any ways of masking or hiding or explaining what it is, or is this still like one of these things that you kind of dread when you're at work?
I don't dread it so much because I've been doing that since I was probably 10, I remember vividly opening the back door of our house, getting to our backyard, and putting my middle finger on like the doorknob and using my, I guess my pointer and my ring finger to actually turn.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like I need to like give this person a finger.
Yeah.
Kind of urge. It's more like it's again, it's one of those weird things I can talk about like for hours. I need to feel a certain amount of tension in the space like between my middle finger and ring finger and middle finger and pointer finger, like in that spot where they meet your hand. So it's doing certain things allows me to relieve that like in like a camouflaged kind of manner.
Okay, I gotcha.
And like I think I said earlier, I can also it's like the opposite of see that I can do like a really crazy like ritual, like swinging my arms around and stuff. That looks like I'm just stretching, but that will kind of relieve the urge. That's one of the ones that I have the hardest time suppressing. Like if it wants to come out, it's coming out one way or the other.
Wow. What else are you dealing with tick wise?
I guess like 3 months ago I started banging my teeth together, which just sucks. It is super uncomfortable and it's loud. It's not one of those ones that you can kind of mask too well sound wise, but it's kind of gone for the time being.
Yeah, well, so I don't want to shine too much light on it then.
Yeah, no. I've always had a pretty wicked eyebrow raise, a good hard blink. I make a lot of noises with my mouth and my lips. One of the more like embarrassing Tourette episodes for me was when my wife was actually in labor.
Yeah,
and the doctor came in to check on her.
Yeah,
and I was in the room and I was making these noises with my lips that sound like a bird. And he's like, "Is there a bird in the room? Is there a bird somewhere in the room? There's that noise again." And I was like, could you just please finish checking on my wife and leave the room?
Oh man. Oh man.
So I do that. I do a good couple like little arm things. And when I was a little kid, my worst tick was I would just do a really sharp nod with my head, like a head jerk almost.
Yeah.
That I remember giving me just like vicious headaches as a kid.
Yeah.
I really bad.
I have that now. I mean, it's sort of, I guess, one of my kind of perennial ticks where it's just a really quick head jerk. And then it's either preceded or followed by me tensing my neck, just like I just kind of picture like this like glow in the middle of my neck and I'm just kind of tightening and tensing it. And that gives me the worst headaches. I'm hating it. I don't know like what's worse, like the tension. I mean, I guess it all kind of combines forces, but just doing that head jerk, what has to be 200 times a day. There's that visual aspect. I kind of feel like I picture my brain in this like jar of water, kind of like sloshing back and forth. And that's like what accompanies that tick. Do you have visual aspects to your ticks?
Not really. Mine, I know there's a lot of folks talk about like the what is the preemptive urge. My ticks are happening before I realize they're happening. It's just a wham bam, it starts, it's done, and it's a very rare that there's any kind of intellectual component to it, I guess is the way I would say it.
Gotcha. So no premonitory urge, no plan. It's just it happens.
Yep. It's so constant. It's like background radiation when you look into a telescope, I guess. It's just it's constant, it's always there.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part for me about this is just trying to find the signal through all the noise in my head, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because there's so much. I think everyone's in the Tourette community has probably seen the illustration of like the iceberg.
Yeah.
And the ticks are just the tip of the iceberg, and there's all the other comorbids that are kind of under the water. And it's the only probably apt kind of diagram to show somebody without Tourette what it's like.
Yeah.
But the iceberg is just so freaking big.
It's massive.
The iceberg's your whole brain.
What else is what else from the iceberg are you dealing with?
I was diagnosed with ADD.
Yeah.
Which again I've always think I've struggled with since I was a little kid.
Yeah,
but
me too.
It's like like when you were a kid, what could you do that you could focus through?
Focus,
like, there are things.
I kind of felt like I always had to have at least one activity in front of me. I mean, there had to be at least one thing, but sometimes there were multiple things that I would kind of go back and forth between, or just do simultaneously, whether it's reading something and holding an object and playing with it, or just any sort of combination of things. Like I always seem to kind of want more. And I was diagnosed with ADD when I was maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8, I guess. But I mean, I was all over the place, and I think I just kind of had to. I mean, I've been terrible at sleep my whole life.
Oh yeah, me too. I hate it.
I don't like sleep. Like I wish I could just kind of
I feel like I've lost.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that feeling where it's like you hit that time of night where you look at the clock and you know what time you have to wake up the next day, and you're like,
oh yeah,
like I have to shut down what I'm doing and get some sleep if I'm going to be of any use tomorrow, but I'm totally not ready for it yet. Like it's such like an I don't want to go to sleep tantrum that I kind of throw to myself.
Yeah, I think it's indicative of that kind of the barrier between your brain and your body that kind of comes with Tourette. I think my body knows it needs to go to sleep.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm pushing 40. I need a solid 7 or 8 hours to be a human.
Yeah,
the next day. If I could do 4, I would do 4.
Yeah, totally.
There's always something I could read, something I could watch, a game I could play.
Absolutely.
I could fold laundry, not that I want to, but there's always something else I could be doing that's better than just being still for 8 hours.
Yeah. God, I so relate. I mean, I have to, even when I'm at work, I have to occasionally take the elevator down, walk around the block, come back in, just because I'll get so jittery kind of sitting at my desk in the same place. And plus, it's just a better way for me to think. I think when I'm kind of being active along with the thought exercise or whatever I'm trying to do or solve. But yeah, I could read. Well, I mean, it's not just screen time. I went to the doctor recently, and one of the nurses there, one of the doctors there, she told me, like less screen time at night. But it's not necessarily just the screen. It could be, again, anything. It could be a book. It could be a magazine. It could be playing a record. It could be just, just whatever it is, whatever I want to absorb and kind of spend my night with. I have brain fuel anyway, all night for that definitely. Kind of thing. But yeah, it's just like the physical exhaustion. Then you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, okay, yeah, maybe it is time for bed. But yeah, God, it's such a bad feeling.
It's always when you wake up at 8 o'clock the next morning and you look at yourself and like, I told you needed to go to bed.
Yes.
But you didn't. You were up till 3 and look at you now.
Yes. Every single time. Every single time I'm like, I think I tell myself late at night that like there have been these odd nights where I've only gotten 4 hours of sleep and I've been fine the next day for whatever reason. And I'll kind of use those as like the currency of like, see, there's a precedent for this. And then,
yeah, you can do it, man.
Yeah. And then, it's like, cool. Okay. 2 or 3 a.m. Alarm set for 7. No problem. I'll get up at 7:15 or 7:25 or whatever. And then I'll just rush. I'll skip breakfast. I'll get to work. But the very first thought when my alarm goes off is like, oh my God, man. Like again, like you did the same thing again. That's a thing.
Yeah. I remember I learned a long time ago, never to finish a book or a video game late at night. Because my mind would always be like just racing with like whatever happened at the end, all the crazy action and stuff.
Yeah.
That was a guaranteed like 2 hours sleep kind of night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once something exciting or interesting gets in my head, it's there for hours.
Yeah.
Hours. If I hear like a cool new record or something, I just want to like binge it over and over and over and over. Because why wouldn't you want to feel the way an awesome new song makes you feel all the time?
Exactly. Yeah. Do you follow routines like that otherwise too? Because I mean, I guess another example would be, the restaurant has 50 items on the menu, but you get the same thing every time. I kind of live inside that, and kind of what you were just saying of like, because I can do the same thing. I can watch the same movie, the same 5-minute video, the same, like whatever's like a greatest hit with me, has a pass for life. I'm not going to get tired of it. And but I think that also kind of applies to my life in other ways where I'm just kind of like fine with what's happening. If it's, again, same restaurant, same menu item, tastes exactly like it did the time before, and I liked it then. So I'm probably going to like it tomorrow too. And I just kind of, live inside these kind of narrow grooves, I guess.
Yeah, no, you speak my language. I love just like, I dig repetition in a broad general sense.
Yeah.
There's a bar near our old apartment in Bristol, Pennsylvania, that we could walk to, which is great because a bar within walking distance is just spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
They had the best. They had the best wings and just the best fries.
Yeah.
And we got the exact same order every time I went there, to the point where this one bartender would just roll her eyes when I walked in and just put the order in before I even sat down at a bar stool or anything. I don't like deviation from things that I normally do. And right. I think it's because I try to be as rigid externally because I can't predict how I'll be internally. It feels so random.
Yeah.
With what I guess they call it the Tourette brain.
Yep.
And the ADD, that I have no idea what my brain's going to want to do from minute to minute, from second to second. That any rigidity that I can enforce outside, I feel a little better about that if I can always control what's going on inside.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I definitely hear that.
It's all coping mechanisms.
Hope you're enjoying this conversation. Quick break and we'll be right back. The Tourette Association of America has been around since 1972, and today is the premier nonprofit in the U.S. working for all people affected by Tourette and tic disorders. One of the ways that happens is through communications and awareness tools, which is one of the reasons why the Tourette Association is the primary sponsor of this podcast. They help me out a lot, and you can find tons of information on their website, tourette.org, tourette.org. And I want to thank them for their support of Tourette's podcast. Anything else from the iceberg that you're managing in your life?
I feel like depression's on the iceberg somewhere. Yeah. I remember I've read so many different, things about Tourette at this point, and I don't remember where I saw which statistic about, which study, but it's a fairly common, comorbid, I think, with Tourette's, and it's something that I've dealt with for a really long time, and I'm just starting to actually seek treatment for it. But it's, I guess, a bad Tourette day makes you feel kind of helpless. And that does not, that really contributes to, a broad, general depressed mood. I remember I had this really horribly self-defeating thought when I was in 7th or 8th grade, something like, men have walked in the moon, you can't even keep your face still.
Yeah.
Or something like that, which is terrible and not the kind of thing you should be thinking about when you're 11.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things that I read about Tourette kids, that it kind of can delay social maturity and stuff because there's a little bit extra going on, but at the same time it makes you ask a lot of questions that you're not normally asking at the age of 9. Like, why, what is normal? Yeah. Why am I just bad at being normal? Was something I asked myself a lot.
Yeah. That's definitely been a repeat. Even I think definitely after the Tourette diagnosis. I feel like I've thought that a million times in my life. But yeah, that was a question early on. Is like, why can't I hold a conversation the same way these other people can, who are exactly my age and from the same neighborhood, and why is their frame of reference different than mine? That's something I was always kind of wondering from youth. And I think I just, I've always been kind of a shrimpy kid, I was always smaller than everybody else. I think I just kind of balled up a lot of things about myself and just kind of decided that you're the little dude that people don't relate to in the same way that they relate to each other, because you're a little bit different and you're kind of small and you're easy to pick on. And I figured it was, I think I was kind of leaning more toward that. But But at the same time, I also couldn't quite grasp what, why they were laughing at what they were laughing at. Certain jokes that I wasn't getting, just mannerisms that everybody else seemed to understand but me, or, just turns of phrase that weren't working for me but did for everybody else. But vice versa too. I felt like I got a lot of things that those other kids around me didn't. And it I guess that ultimately just kind of made me feel different. And that's when I, discovered underground music and things like that kind of felt like they were kind of the underdog themselves, and you kind of relate to them in that way. But yeah, I mean, it's tough asking yourself those questions and not really having any hard answers. Even if you do get a diagnosis, and the shock you can sometimes feel with that, especially if you're young and you're trying to kind of navigate society and be cool. And I'm saying that in quotes, but those are real issues, for people who are 10, 11, 12 years old, and that's survivability and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. This makes it tough.
Survivability is a good way to talk about it. I mean, I remember, I don't know if this is a problem for you, but it's always been a problem for me. And it's something that I think most people just take for granted. If I'm having a conversation with you, just with Ben, if it's just me and you, it's fine. A conversation with more than two people to me might as well be like a battlefield.
Yeah.
I know you had to talk in a group. I don't know whose turn it is. I don't know like who's supposed to talk next.
Yeah.
That's always been just a huge social barrier for me. And I don't know, that could just be a me thing.
No, I relate to that too. Yeah. I lock up. I'm the last to go, that kind of thing. Unless it's something where I just feel, particularly impassioned about, subject wise or something like that. But yeah, I'm exactly the same way. I lock up and I get kind of a headache because it feels like turbulence. Like that's what it feels like to me.
Okay. Yeah. That's a great way to say it, I think. I guess when you were a kid, like what was the thing that you were comfortable talking to like a group of people about? For me, I could talk about like video games and books.
Yeah.
With no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it, and maybe this is what drew me to, mentioning underground music again, but I think anything that I had that I knew could be cool and could be popular or could be, but they hadn't caught on to yet, I was very happy to talk about it. Or like different kinds of, like you mentioned video games. Growing up, we didn't have Nintendo or anything like that. We had a Commodore. So I would play these old Sierra games and these old Quest games where you had to type in your commands and there were 16 colors on the screen and all that. And that was the kind of thing that was really cool, or was about to be. And I felt like I was the authority and these kids hadn't caught up to it yet. And I can be the popular one for being able to know about this kind of thing first. And that was the kind of thing where I think it made me very curious. And I think that maybe even kind of nurtured the sort of obsessive way I can go about seeking out information about something I'm really into for the moment. So if I discover something and it feels kind of edgy and new to me and it's intriguing, I want to learn more about it, I will go headlong and just learn everything I can as quickly as I can, practice it as much as I can to really kind of get it down and master it, or get to a place where I feel comfortable with the skill that I have. And I feel like that was kind of nurtured by the fact that I couldn't relate very directly to my friends in my neighborhood or the kids I went to school with, which was a different group of kids. But if I had something that intrigued them that they hadn't caught on to yet, that's where I felt like I was kind of in control. And I don't know, that's probably the first time I've talked about it that way or thought about it that way. But I do think those things are connected, just kind of seeking out things that are rare and precious, or just something that I can kind of have and be the narrator for. I don't know.
I like the way you put that, being the narrator for this thing that nobody else knows about. That was me with books, but books weren't super cool. Like even to this day, I'll tell somebody about a book, like, oh, cool. Like, you still read? Like, yeah, I read all the time.
What stuff do you like to read?
I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah.
And a lot of like history and stuff like that. I enjoyed, I guess, just the transportation as a kid. And that's carried well into my adulthood, being,
Yeah.
taken away from feeling just different all the time.
Yeah.
And if you're in some other galaxy on a spaceship, you're not the kid who feels weird during lunch.
Yeah.
You're the captain of the Star Destroyer, whatever.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing for me with video games. And that was just that was the best escape that I had, and that's the thing I still enjoy to this day.
I was a major, and this is courtesy of my dad too, but I was a major sci-fi and fantasy just fanatic when I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
That would have included, Star Trek, but also a lot of the literature, the classics, Asimov and Heinlein, but also Frank Herbert. Like, I really like the Dune books and the sort of focus on.
I couldn't get into that, man. I tried reading Dune, and it was like trying to read code or something. It was so dense.
It's super dense. Yeah, it's a super dense book, and it feels like there are like 30 plots going at once.
Yeah,
but I like the focus on the kind of there's a focus on sort of psychology and how you regard yourself, and sort of like the messaging you give off with your body. And I really liked, or somehow kind of related to that, just being kind of like a person curious kind of person. Like just being curious about human mannerisms and interaction and that kind of thing.
I think part of knowing that there's something a little bit different about your brain makes you more observant about other people and how they interact. Because I think I kind of feel like if you're, I guess, neurotypical, you don't know that you are. Right. That's not a thing you have to think about. Oh, this is how my brain's supposed to work. Why would I think about how it works?
Right.
So it's a very kind of it's not always a thought. You're not always thoughtful about how your brain works if you don't have anything wrong with it, I guess.
Yeah, it's like you lack the contrast. I see the contrast from myself to sort of the general public around me. But and again, like it's kind of assume maybe everybody thinks they have something wrong with them, and it's just a game of masking or something like that. But yeah, if you don't have the contrast, I guess, or if you're a neurotypical person and you are, you go throughout your day, without exceptions with people who are very similar to you, then, you may not have the contrast to think anything of yourself, except for what you want to improve about yourself. But yeah, I mean, I think that's true.
Yeah, I had this fantasy where I had like a neurotypical brain for like a day, just a day.
Yeah,
I just want to know what the differences are. Like, would I recognize myself in a brain with typically functioning neurons and stuff?
Right.
Is it that big of a different experience, or is it is it kind of the same as what I am now, and just I have tics and I don't focus as well, or is it just a totally different kind of experience?
Right. Yeah. Because I think I've said this on an episode before, where it's like I think I had this sort of runaway frame of mind for a second, where everything that might have been sort of unique to me, I guess I was maybe in some way trying to find a way to shoehorn it into, this is directly because of Tourette syndrome. And who knows? Mm-hmm. But the sort of secondary and third effects and the ripple effects of having Tourette syndrome on your personality, I mean, it obviously has to shape your personality to some degree.
Oh, yeah, hugely.
Yeah, and I've always wondered with me to what extent, is it just, it set on when I was a kid, when I was sort of becoming a person, and that wave just washed over me completely, or would I just kind of be like this anyway if I didn't have TS? And I know that's not completely true, because I mean the self-consciousness, just things that happen in your life, or that decisions you make in your life based on your pride with TS or your shame with TS. It was shame for me for sure, but yeah, I mean, I'm so curious about that in the same way you are. Like, if it just lifted for a day, what would things look like?
Yeah, I always say to myself that again, it's not the most positive thing. Like if I could get rid of it, I probably would, given that I could have the exact same wife and the exact same son.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like the Back to the Future theory of time travel. As long as those two things stay exactly the same,
yeah,
I'd probably just get rid of it.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder a lot about the like what parts of my personality like came with because of the Tourette's. Would I still, be kind of an introvert if I didn't have these tics as a kid? I wonder about the depression part of it too. Because I think there's like 3 different potential scenarios. Like I have depression that's attached to the Tourette's. Like it's a comorbid condition that is tethered to the fact that I also have Tourette's. Is it a result of how I feel because I have Tourette's, or if I never had Tourette's, would I still have depression? And that's that's the kind of rabbit hole that I can get stuck down for hours.
Depression, I'm looking at the iceberg now, and depression sits pretty high on it. Rage, behavioral issues, disinhibition, learning disabilities, depression, handwriting difficulties, ADHD, obsessive compulsive behaviors, sleep issues, anxiety, social communication deficits, impulsivity, sensory processing issues, executive functioning deficits, transition issues. And I can relate to, at one point in my life or other, I can relate to virtually all of that.
Yeah, that sounds like a Tuesday for me.
Yeah.
but it's funny how, Tourette's one of those things that people can still kind of make fun of. And I think about this a lot. If there's a person who's making fun of you or because you have Tourette, or, not even vocalizing it, just thinking less of you because you have tics. You're still, you, Ben, and me, Ed, we're still at work. We're still doing the best we can, being good, decent people with all this baggage. And if, the person making fun of you dealt with for a day what we deal with every day, that person would break like a cheap chair. And, that's the thing you got to remember. Yeah. Like this, Tourette and the things you deal with because of it, they can break you a little bit, but they can make you mighty. They can they can make you be able to push through anything.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of folks who wouldn't be able to deal with a fraction of this for one day. And that's, I think, something that everyone, we all need to remember when we're having a bad day. Or you're allowed to. You got a pretty serious neurological condition, and if you didn't beat it today, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like exercise for your resilience. It just kind of. I'm not saying hard times are good, but it is true the way you manage it and what you pull from it and how it affects you as a person and how you deal with that is, I guess, the sign of class. And the strength and creativity and wisdom that I've gotten from everybody I've talked with has been extremely notable. I mean, just really, really hard to miss. And every single time I have one of these conversations, at the end, I'm like, God, like this like all along, like, why didn't I start doing this like 10 years ago? Or, it's, and that's a game I play too, is, what if I was always open about having TS? What if, anybody who made fun of me, I had a clever way to kind of get back at them or really make them think about what they said to me, or it just something where the situations were that I could be okay being open about it. And I could have been, but not according to the Ben Brown at that time, the me in high school, wasn't going to talk about it. But I play that game all the time of like, what would things look like had I been more open about it? What trajectory would that have started for me? And again, it's like one of these unanswerable brain questions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I can get lost in that kind of stuff. But I think of like this, like, the conversations that you're having now with the podcast and the community that you're building around it, and all the other efforts going on in the Tourette community, they can help 13-year-old Ben Brown or 13-year-old Ed Cooney, but they can help some other 13-year-old kid.
Right.
And that's a worthy way to spend your time. If we were made fun of as kids for tics and for the way that we socialize as a result of that, maybe we can prevent like 2 13-year-old kids from ever dealing with that through talking through activism, that is a worthy cause, even if it's just two kids.
Yep.
If you can make two people's lives a little bit better, why wouldn't you? I think that's an important way to look at it for adults with Tourette. We can't undo the way that it's affected us, but we can help make sure it doesn't affect a little kid the same way.
Well, another thing I like about this is that, parents of newly diagnosed kids will tune in just to kind of get, again, just a frame of reference. What are these people like? What's the future of my son or daughter? Just having something to tune into and maybe kind of cheer up with, because it's not as bad as you think. Or, some people are brand new to TS and only know the sort of sensationalized or narrow, view of it. And then just kind of hearing you and me, talking the way we're talking and just kind of having a hangout. I mean, it's really fun to talk about this stuff in a conversational way. And then I guess knowing that other people may be able to kind of reach in and relate to it too and benefit some way. But speaking of parenting and everything in genetics, I mean, have you noticed TS or anything like it in your family elsewhere?
Yeah, my only 2-year-old has just a hard brain that is so spectacular. I'm almost proud of it. It's just so like, oh wait, you got a bit of your old man there. And he went for his 2-year checkup last week, and the doctor said he has provisional tic disorder, which is, as you well know, kind of a step on the journey to Tourette's.
Yeah.
Although it's not a definite thing, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like a constant thing. And it's not, he's young enough to not have enough context that every time it happens, he looks kind of surprised for a second.
Right.
Like, what the heck was that, Dad? I have no idea, son. What are you talking about? But this is only, I guess, Friday of last week.
Brand new.
And it's selfishly made me think a lot about myself.
Yeah.
Like I went for my initial diagnosis, so that I could make sure that if he looked like he was symptomatic, I knew how to deal with it and how to talk to him about it. And it looks like that, could be a thing that kind of comes true down the road. And it kind of brought me into a little more focus that I need to kind of get myself right with accepting myself a little more and engaging in a little more activism and, trying to make, potentially having Tourette a little bit better for him.
Yeah.
If that's the way it comes down the road. And, sadly, it made me realize that I really haven't fully accepted myself as a Tourette patient yet. I'm still embarrassed by it. I still feel a little bit of shame around it. I don't talk about it too much. I did write a very lengthy blog for a couple of months, and so I got a lot of it out there. But
it was great, by the way.
Day to day, I really don't talk about it. Thank you. But this, it's a hard thing to talk about in like a social setting. I know you've mentioned it before. How do you bring it up? I can't believe the Giants drafted Daniel Jones with the 6th pick, and overall, by the way, I have Tourette syndrome. You want to talk about it? Mm-hmm. It's just such a hard thing to just bring up in conversation. And I know people notice my tics. You can't not. But it's just kind of silent. Oh, he's a little bit weird, but mostly normal, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the first impression I give off when I'm at work around new coworkers. I will say, I mean, even though I'm around sort of my core team of coworkers, I'm ticking freely and openly, I do still have that sort of uncomfortable feeling when, say, for example, it's like the executive director of the company I work for, and he's talking to somebody who's important to him, and I'm around, and I have to tick. Like, I don't really want to tick in that situation. Or, it's like that. I do feel, I don't want to interrupt the flow of whatever it is they're doing. They're important. They're talking about important things. I'm going to do everything I can to suppress this. But it's that is still in me, and that's still something I'm trying to punch through. But I think it does come down to that question of like, what is, I mean, just having in your toolbox sort of these different scenario situations where you do know how to bring it up and you're rehearsed and you're exercised and, you know, I'm prepared for this. I know exactly how to deal with this situation with my boss and this guy he's trying to sell something to or whatever. It's just that lack of go-to, I think, even though this is something I've dealt with my whole life and I've always wondered about it, always thought about it. I've asked people on the podcast and they've had their own ways of doing it and kind of cutting through awkward situations, but it still feels like an awkward situation and that's uncomfortable. And that's still something I'm punching through.
Yeah, it's a really short list of people that I tick freely around.
Yeah.
My wife, my immediate family for the most part, because they've been around me my whole life, so it's not like it's new to them.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think part of not being diagnosed till I was later is that I never realized that I was suppressing tics. I just tried not to do it, so it's kind of like a background thing, almost like a background program running all the time.
Yeah.
And if I only kind of let it ride around a couple of people, and depending on it's weird because the more I don't want to tick in a situation, the more I'm probably going to tick there because I'm anxious about something, obviously.
Yeah.
And being anxious and being tired are the two things that most trigger my tics. So it's a hard line to toe because it's always worse when you don't want it to be the worst.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
Yeah.
And it's like there's this sort of like weird cruelty to it. Like I can't hide if I'm tired or anxious. There's no way. I tick like a madman.
Yeah.
My face, I look like Jim Carrey in The Mask when I'm really tired. Yeah. My face is just all over the place.
Wow.
My arms are flicking out. I'm making like tiny little like grunt sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's so blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
And even if I'm tired, I still don't want to sleep the next night. This is so lame.
Or that thing you tell yourself where it's like, I'll just make up for it with a nap.
Yeah, maybe when I was 21.
Yeah.
Now when I'm 39.
Not happening.
No, it's one thing to see the number go up. It's another thing to feel older.
Are your tics, have they gotten worse in adult life, or are they just kind of flat and there? Or
they've gotten worse. A good deal worse, I guess, in the last 3 years or so.
Yeah.
Part of it's just honestly just having a kid. It's I'm constantly worried about him. I'm constantly worried about being a good parent, and that kind of low level anxiety that you internalize and walk around with. It affects me in a very noticeable physical way.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trade my kid for anything. I would tick 1,000 extra times a day if I get to love him every day the way I do. He's the absolute joy of my life. The one that at least my wife is like the second joy of my life. But that, I guess since my wife was pregnant, they've just gotten a lot worse. And also I think being diagnosed and knowing that I have this, listen, I have this thing. I can do this. It's not like I always considered it my tics to be a failing of myself, that this was a thing that every other person dealt with, and they just dealt with it better than me. They were able to keep it in, they were able to internalize it, and I'm just not as good at it. When I finally got diagnosed, I was like, oh, wait a second, this is an actual thing. You haven't failed at being a normal person. You've had this condition your whole life.
Right. Probably.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely getting worse as an adult, and it's been a pretty decent climb, actually. Especially by the time like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon hits most days, I'm wild with my face tics, with my hand tics, with my quiet grunts and stuff. It's a pretty consistent concert. I know we had that conversation on Twitter a few months ago about being in the car. And once I get into the car after a work day, man, I'm so relieved. Like, here they come.
Yeah.
But nobody else is here.
I love it.
So that's just, and about a half hour, just get them all out.
Yeah, that's my commute. I got about a 30-minute drive. And until a few months ago, I had about a 1.5 mile walk to my car from like between my office and where I parked.
Oh,
And
geez.
now I'm immediately across the street. And as soon as I'm leaving work, but because even though I'm kind of okay ticking around the office, it's still like, that's not where I want to have that release, that explosion, that kind of thing. Dash to the car. The moment I get in it, it's party time. Like the ticks just blast, and it feels great. It feels very nice. It's a safe thing, and none of them interfere with my driving or anything like that. I mean, but yeah, that's the car is the place.
That's how it is at like 6:45 every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say the car and mowing the front lawn. That's because just the volume. I mean, the vocal ticks can have a party then too. Yeah. But yeah, I like having those little like, I guess safe zone is a kind of a generic way to say it. I'm going to try to think of a better way to say that.
Camouflage zones.
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, I work around a lot of conveyors that are motorized, and there's stuff banging around all the time. So my vocal ticks at work. Are for the most part pretty covered up. But I still don't too much. That's the thing. I still kind of run that background program of tick suppression until I'm free and clear.
Right.
I don't even think even one time in my adult life, someone aside from my wife has ever said like, what's up with your face? It's such a, I know people notice it. I just wish they would just ask.
Yeah.
I will gladly tell you it can be a 10-second conversation. It could be a 10-minute conversation.
Yeah.
But I know that you notice.
Yeah.
So just ask the question real quick, and, you can be comfortable with me. I can be comfortable with you. And that makes it, I think, better for everybody involved.
I've so many times I've seen somebody pick up on one of my ticks and then mimic it to the person who also noticed me tick right then. I've seen that so many times of just sort of like, what's this guy doing? And then they'll just kind of imitate it. And it's just if you're going to do that kind of in full visibility of me, I mean, somehow that's the easier option than, just either not doing it, or if you're that curious, just ask. But I like what Akiva said in, I think it was in season 3 where he was answering a question about, what can people who don't have TS do to be considerate of people who do? And, like, should you ask, should you not ask? And I think his approach was, ask if there's a real true reason to, or if you can tell the person wants you to ask, but don't do it just to satisfy your own curiosity. Like, why are you curious about what they're doing? Do you want to learn, or do you just, want to figure it out and go home? And I liked that approach of, for any non-TS people listening, if you've ever wondered that, I really like that approach of just kind of, why are you wondering? Do you want to ask the person, solve the mystery for yourself, or is there, some kind of, legit reason to ask? But I always prefer that someone talk to me about it.
Oh, sure. I mean, this is if you don't have Tourette, it has to be kind of fascinating to hear us explain it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I think about it like this. Like, I think I tweeted this like last week. Like, as a Touretter, could you imagine what it would be like just to be able to be still for as long as you want, for knowing that next time you move, it's going to be because you want to move? I can barely even comprehend what that would be like.
Yeah. No idea.
Now, like, that's what it's like for a non-Touretter when we explain it to them. Like, they can't imagine not being able to control their bodies. It's a total, square peg, round hole kind of thing. But, we will try our best to explain it to you, to educate you, and to every time I talk to somebody about it, I kind of become better at talking about it with the next person.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this didn't work. This explanation worked. This comparison fell flat. But every time you talk about it, you get a little bit better at talking about it.
No, I feel like my entire approach, well, I mean, absolutely my entire approach to this whole thing has changed in the past year and a half, 2 years. But I mean, even my language, even my sort of sense of awareness about what other people may be going through, that kind of thing. I mean, all of that is completely changed just by talking the way we're talking. And exactly what you were talking about, I feel like I'm infinitely better than I used to be at kind of talking about anything in my life, really, just by kind of going through this exercise of trying to put, some sort of frame of reference and some context and some sort of place in the world to me and my tics and kind of where they all fit in. And I mean, it really has changed everything just talking about it.
Sure. I feel the same way having listened to all your episodes. It's the one thing that I think anybody can take away from listening is that you never know what a person's got going on inside their head.
Yeah.
You have no idea what that person who was curt to you at work has going on in their head or at home.
Right.
You never know, why that person was smiling, which is probably a good thing, but you don't really know.
Right.
So it's, cut people some slack.
Absolutely.
And instead of just snapping the judgment, which I do, I'm not going to say like I don't, just, take a second to kind of retreat into your mind. Like, hey, wait a second. I have this going on in my head. For all I know, this person has it 10 times worse with some invisible problem that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it actually ends up being a nicer way to live, I think.
The concept of making fun of somebody for something that they can't control or just have, kind of built into the system of their life. I can't imagine it now. I used to, back in the days of immaturity, but it's just having that sense of empathy by way of knowing what it's like to have something that people around you are going to misunderstand really makes it easy to kind of afford the same courtesy or afford courtesy to the other people around you. And it is a much nicer way to live.
Yeah. And I hear, from like certain people like, well, it was okay to, make fun of people when I was a kid. Like, no, it wasn't okay. It was just, it was accepted.
Yeah.
There's a difference. That's because something bad happened for a long time. Doesn't mean it was ever okay that it happened.
Yeah.
Like, it's totally different.
Yeah. But
like,
back in my day, we dealt
should've.
with it and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like on the playground. Well, I was the sort of scrawniest kid in the playground. So it still didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. I hope, I guess schoolyards and classrooms are more hospitable places for kids with neurodivergence and any other problems than they were when we were kids. I guess people talk about being like othered by their peers for certain differences, and even if it's not coming from external bully sources or whatever, turns out you can other yourself.
Yep.
Even if you're not being constantly bullied or constantly teased, just knowing that you're different can do all the damage that being teased would do.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, the value you assign to yourself and how you treat yourself. I think that's something Jaleesa said in season 2 was that, if you treat yourself badly, other people will too. And if you assign yourself a low value, then other people will too. And I guess I didn't realize how true that was at different points in my life and different things I was down about myself on. And just finding these ways to feel better, the ripple effects from that are like mushroom cloud. It's totally true. How you regard yourself is going to be adopted around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's hard to assign yourself self-worth sometimes.
Yeah.
Which sounds bad, but even when you have just a tiny difference from everyone around you, I think it can have a really profound effect on how you feel about yourself in that moment and going forward.
Self-valuations are pretty uncomfortable, though. You're right. I mean, you want to avoid being conceited. You want to avoid being, I guess what people would call self-deluded. And, you want to be real about yourself and kind of respect the truth about yourself while, obviously also doing what you can to just kind of feel good about how you look and everything like that, out in public and everything. But yeah, it's It is an uncomfortable exercise, like finding things you like about yourself and then affirming them to yourself that you are good at this, that sort of thing. It's just, it feels kind of cheesy, but it's still essential, I would say.
Yeah, it is cheesy, but if you don't accept yourself, nobody else probably will either. If you're constantly beating yourself up, then I think other people are going to see that about you, which stinks. This is my first ever chat with with another person with Tourette. So
no way.
Yeah, first ever.
Wow.
Aside from Twitter interactions, it's comforting to know that like there are other people out there who are dealing with the same things as you are. But one of the things I was thinking was just that even within the Tourette community, we all experience it so differently. I feel like. For different reasons, we all have different kind of flavors of Tourette and different comorbids. But even just having somebody who just kind of understands what you're going through is so valuable.
Thanks so much for listening. Send your feedback. Don't wait. Do it now. Or just do it whenever is convenient. What was the best part of this talk? What did we miss? What part made you react? Did you relate? Did anything surprise you? Just send some feedback. tourettespodcast@gmail.com. If you can't remember that, hopefully you can remember tourettespodcast.com. There's a contact link there. That's also where you can find all the past episodes and show notes. I'll have some links to related materials in the show notes with this episode at tourettespodcast.com. Tourette's Podcast is here thanks to the support of the Tourette Association of America, online at tourette.org, and with the help of listeners like you. If you'd like to support Tourette's Podcast, head to patreon.com/Tourette's Podcast. And I do have some announcements about Patreon soon. Thanks for listening. Glad to be back. Tourette's Podcast is part of the Geeks Rising Network with a roster of amazing podcasts at geeksrising.com. Let's talk. In the meantime, head to the discussion group on Facebook or email me, again, tourettespodcast@gmail.com. We're back with a new episode next week. Thanks again. This is Ben.